Hello everyone and welcome to this newest edition of Aeronautica. This is Remleiz from 40k Theories.
And hi, this is Fiaura the Tank Girl. We're doing orcs, aren't we?
Yes we are, we're taking a look at orc aircraft. Now one thing we need to get out of the way off the bat. Yes, we know orc psychic field, what orcs believe happens will happen. We know about that, but we're probably not going to be taking that into account in regards to the aerodynamics and actual validity of these things actually flying. So we know it exists, and that's probably how they'll actually work in 4K, but we just want to get that out there now.
Now, I'm going to go over how all this is done, and then Remleiz is going to lead us straight into the first orc aircraft. So, the way I'm going to approach these vehicles is as follows. I need to see how well they can potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver or avoid damage, their armament, as well as how they can deliver set of payloads, and lastly, how well they will react to getting shot. During this, I will also look at their utility and how physics says the possible claims around how they work actually work in real physics. That is to say, I'm trying to take these and tell you if you can actually build them or not. All of these aircraft were either 3D printed, or, which wasn't that expensive, or they were actual borrowed models placed into the University of Delaware wind tunnel, available for $50 per hour. Now, I can't use their recording equipment because they require me to buy lenses and stuff like that to use their recording equipment. They won't let me use my own, so I don't have video footage unless somebody wants to pony up the $400 per hour of use for their camera equipment. But we then take the lift-to-drag ratios using various speeds at 1/40th scale, the supposed scale used by Games Workshop, and we say that the total drag is equal to 0.5 times surface area of the direction of travel times density of the object times the drag coefficient, which is what we're using the wind tunnel to acquire, times the velocity it's traveling. Understand that all the math for this is checked 4 times per episode before I actually go forward and write the script. And furthermore, all of this is pure theory. I might be wrong. It's okay to be wrong in science. So in the meantime, enjoy the science.
So let's jump in and take a look at the first aircraft today, which is the Warcopter. Now the Warcopter, also named a Chinook, I see what you did there, Games Workshop, is a large troop-carrying craft which is a combination gunship, aerial transport, heavy lift and long-range reconnaissance vehicle. They're used for, but quite normally by alt commandos to get behind enemy lines and have the added bonus of letting the passengers shout insults at their friends, because orcs. Now, these things pack an extremely heavy punch, being armed with twin-linked def guns and a nose-mounted big shooter, although some may feature a Scorcher, rocket launcher or custom Mega Blaster in place of the big shooter, or even twin-linked Rattler cannons instead of the def guns.
Okay. It flies. I mean, this is a helicopter. This is not that hard to analyze. The Orkcopters all fly. They have proper counterbalance as required for the rotors. The rotors even spin in opposite directions on the models.
Bloody hell.
I mean, they're not aerodynamic, but then again, most helicopters aren't really very aerodynamic. They rely on sheer engine power and their rotors to generate enough lift to keep them in the air as well as to move them forward. It's kind of odd saying this, but every variant of the Orkcopter that we put in the wind tunnel and looked at and did the math on and took measurements for, they all have proper ratios for lift to drag as well as for the rotors. They do drag like modern helicopters at roughly 1.5 to 1.7 depending upon the speed they're traveling. And our testing indicates that the model of the frame can sustain speeds of 418 kilometers per hour, which is faster than any modern helicopter.
Pretty good stuff with the Orks.
Armament, they're armed with the everything.
They're orcs. What do you expect?
I mean, they just mount whatever weapon they want onto it, and on top of this, all the people on board carry their guns. The problem is the orcs have no targeting systems. It's all eyeballed, which kind of explains why they have to get really close. Their range is probably limited to at most 500 meters at maximum flight altitude. which is well short of the engagement range of a Hellfire missile, capable of hitting a target out to 4 kilometers accurately. However, unlike a modern helicopter, they have armor. Like Space Marine Thunderhawk levels of armor. The armor plating on these, when we took measurements and then measured it against the Lehman Russ and used 1/40th scale calculations, they have more armor than a Lehman Russ.
So essentially, these are tanks with helicopter blades.
These are tanks with helicopter blades. You have tank copters. I can't believe
Only
I said
the
that.
Orks. Only the Orks would come up with something like this.
Even factoring in the weight of the armor, they only require 120 to 130 kilonewtons of force to get off the ground, which is well short of the required kilonewtons of force to get a Chinook off the ground. So, it flies.
That's a very good start for the Orks then. Let's see if they can keep it up. Next up, we got the Fighter. Now, the Fighters are the smallest type of aircraft produced by the Orks, used for dogfighting and ground attack. They're built for speed and firepower, typically carrying big shooters and a small wing of bombs and rockets. Now, despite its crude design, the Fighter is easily a match for any Imperial naval fighter, and its engine is remarkably effective, capable of producing a huge amount of thrust.
Okay, the variants of the fighter that I got my hands on and got to test will fly, but they will not fly like jets. They fly like prop aircraft. None of them can exceed 800 kilometers an hour without risking the wings or fuselage shearing off. Please remember that the speed of sound is 1184 kilometers per hour. Their lift-to-drag ratios are very similar to a P-51 Mustang, but they are dead on par, for the most part, with the P-48 Thunderbolt D. This is roughly 0.335 lift-to-drag at combat speeds of around 330 kilometers an hour. But as with the Eldar Nightwing, once we cranked it up to Mach 1, the aircraft simply will not hold together. We aborted the test rather than risk damaging the nice model I had borrowed. But we hit around 600 scale, which, for your purposes, guys, is 35 kilometers an hour of wind for 600 scale at 140th scale. The aircraft was starting to come off of its base, so we had to stop. On top of that, we hit a lift-to-drag ratio of in excess of 3, which nothing really flies when you hit that. It's kind of into flying brick territory. So yes, all of the Ork fighters we tested came out relatively the same. Good characteristics at lower speeds, but awful, horrendous characteristics once we cranked up the throttle. Considering how they look and how they act, some of them actually have exact dimensions of similar prop aircraft. One of them in particular actually had the same wingspan as a P-38 Lightning.
Ooh.
Unlike prop or any other aircraft for that matter, though, these things have armor plating. I mean, aircraft don't generally have armor at all. Sidewinder missiles are fragmentation rounds. Like, they literally have the same firepower in them as a bandolier of frag grenades. And these have an obscene amount of armor. One of them actually had thicker plating than a Baneblade. How does that fly? This does explain the slower speed. This significantly explains their slower speeds. They aren't able to fly as fast because it's a flying Baneblade, as far as armor is concerned. Firepower-wise, now I am not an Ork fangirl, but damn it, Orks, why do you put so much Deka on these? Because
Orks. They
are able to carry the combined payload of a B-5029 Super Fortress and an F-15 Super Strike Eagle at nearly 80,000 kilograms of bombs, Orks, and other implements of "I'm going to shoot you."
Again, this is Orks. What do you expect?
Now, this is brings it all to where getting them off of the ground is a problem. Yes, it can fly. Just don't expect it to really actually dogfight a jet. Yes, I know the lore says one thing, but the fact of the matter is this aircraft simply will not go that fast before it flies apart. Or proceeds to nosedive into the ground from stalling. They only need 102,712 kilograms of thrust to get off the ground, which is 11% more than a B-52 Stratofortress with a 71,000 kilogram payload. I'm not surprised by this. They have good lift-to-drag ratio. They can actually fly, but don't expect it to fly faster than like 400 kilometers an hour. Don't expect it to outrun the Warcopters, because they won't.
A jet that's slower than a helicopter.
A jet that is slower than a helicopter.
Let's see if the next one does any better. The Deka Jet. Now, the Deka Jet is a fighter aircraft specializing in both air-to-air and air-to-ground attack missions, propelled by a single gigantic engine. Now, Deka Jet pilots believe firmly in quantity over quality and bolt as many guns as possible to their aircraft. Some of those bullets are bound to hit the target after all. Now, most Deka Jets share common features, but like most vehicles, no two Deka Jets are truly the same, and some will actually have different customizations and the like, but they carry thousands of rounds of ammunition as a whole, generally armed with an array of 2 to 3 twin-linked super shooters.
I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but this is going to be a short and simple entry. The Deka Jet is a MiG-15. We literally took the MiG-15 model that was on the shelf at the university, put them side by side and measured them. They are literally exact copies with Ork symbols drawn on it. They have the same exact lift-to-drag ratios regardless of speed. It has almost the exact same amount of firepower. And I hate to say it, but it's a precise copy to the detail of a MiG-15.
Look at it this way, at least we know it can fly.
I mean, it flies. No questions asked. And I don't want to be incredibly lazy here, but all of the statistics for this aircraft, to the millimeter, are found on the Wikipedia for a MiG-15.
Fair enough.
It has the same amount of firepower, and oddly enough, unlike the other Ork aircraft, which is the part that surprised us, it has the same armor as a MiG-15. None.
Oh, so a Deka Jet is pretty generally weak overall compared to the other Ork vehicles we've looked at so far.
Which is proven because it has less firepower and it isn't armored like a goddamn tank. I honestly think that the Orks found an STC for human history. It happened to have a MiG-15 on it, and they just copied it.
That might very well be the case, actually, because they're good at reverse engineering from other races.
That, or they found a MiG-15 in a museum and were like, "Pretty! Let's make it fly."
That as well. So let's move on to something else. The Burner Bomber. For all you pyromaniacs out there. This is basically a jet that carries a whole crap ton of flamethrowers and napalm, equipped with incendiary bombs and missiles, performing low attack runs at low altitude, which is incredibly dangerous and not only for the target, generally featuring a twin-linked super shooter, a grot-manned defense turret, twin-linked big shooter, and a payload including 2 burner bombs and up to 6 Scorcher missiles.
This one's actually interesting. It tried to be a much bigger Deka Jet and then failed horribly. The wings are too short to generate enough lift. This leaves its lift-to-drag ratio stationary at the ground at 2.27, the same lift-to-drag ratio as a BMW when it's not moving.
Oh, God.
At an estimated 102 metric tons, that's 102,000 kilograms when we factor in armor, armament, the pilots, and the aircraft itself. This means getting it to fly is a colossal effort and a half. How much effort? 559.92 kilonewtons of force, or roughly 4 times that of an F-16 is what is required to get it off the ground.
But is it more aerodynamic than the brick wall? That's the test.
It requires 2.5 times more force than a B-52 Stratofortress to just get off the ground.
Oh dear.
So it might get off the ground, but it's not leaving without doing a huge amount of damage. How much damage do you really want to know it does? Well, a 747 commercial liner generates a 190 kilometer backwind for the 200 meters of distance. It only requires 106 kilonewtons of force to lift off with a full load. This thing generates in excess of 400 kilometers per hour wind force behind it, in a cone that goes nearly 2.2 kilometers in distance. This is the same destructive force and nearly identical destructive capabilities of an F-5 tornado.
Wow.
This thing literally generates tornado and hurricane force winds behind it to get off the ground in a spectacular way. So what you would see is it starting to take off, and as it got to the end of the runway, everything behind it would literally be blown away.
Now bear in mind it's carrying a whole crap ton of incendiaries as well.
This is the interesting part. It carries the same amount of incendiary explosive as an A-10 Warthog equipped for a napalm assault. Yes, it literally has the same amount of firepower as two miniaturized air fuel bombs and 6 1,000 kilogram incendiary napalm shots. In addition to the main guns.
There's going to bound to be at least one orc there who goes, "I loves the smell of napalm in the morning." Whoa!
I imagine so. I imagine also he loves the fact that he creates a tornado on the ground when he lifts off.
Now imagine him dropping the incendiary payload, flying over it, and creating a burning tornado.
Joy. Just what we needed, a fire spout. Now, assuming it can get off the ground, and assuming it can fly, it has a turning radius of the North American continent.
So, not very agile then.
It turns 0.7 degrees per second at a combat speed of 408 kilometers an hour.
Oh dear.
When I did the math, I was flabbergasted. Because this is insanely stupid. I mean, I'm trying to be nice to you orcs, but you don't need to take 255.6 kilometers to turn around.
No.
So if you missed the first run, it's going to be a bit before they get back and do it again, about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And you're going to fly over, I don't know, the entire front.
Which leaves you open to being shot down even more.
Which being shot down is going to be a pain in the ass.
Considering that you have an entire napalm factory on you.
Well, you have an entire napalm factory on you, which would be bad if it exploded. Yes, that would be incredibly bad if it covered your entire plane in fire. If not for the fact that everywhere but the cockpit, shows how much orcs value their own lives, has more armor than a land raider.
I should hope so, carrying all those explosives.
Everywhere but the cockpit. Notice it but the cockpit, because some of these were open cockpit. And I stared.
Some of them like to feel the wind in their hair, if they had hair.
I stared, looked at that, looked at the cockpits, and went, is it just me, or is it weird that the grot on the machine gun has better protection than the pilot?
Well, yeah, because grots are weedy.
So, yes, the plane itself can take a hit, but the pilot's probably going to die. which means that when it crashes and explodes, it might survive the firestorm that surrounded itself for the orcs to go recover it and then shove some other poor son of a bitch into it.
Now, if you thought that was a dangerous chip,